and welcome to the first Chameleon chat. I am very honored to have adopted Connor, or Connor Howe, today with me, and he agreed to be my first person that I'm going to chat with. So we'll see how this goes. Thanks, Connor. And
Yeah, thanks. Sorry.
a couple of housekeeping things we're just going to hit real quick so we can get right on into the chat. Is like I said, if you will please stay on mute. We'll be taking questions at the end of this. You can put them in the chat. If there is a question in the chat, hang on, I'm going to admit a few more people. There we go. If you have a question, put it in the chat. If it's a question that you're wanting to have answered, then you can upvote it. So if it's something you like, you can hit like or some other kind of reaction. Jude, our lovely moderator, is going to be watching the chat. Thank you so much, Jude. I really appreciate you doing this for us today. You can find her on Instagram, Facebook, Finding Home with Jude, all sorts of places, Fireside, and lots of things that she does because she's amazing. After Connor and I talk, we're going to take those questions, but I do want to remind you all, if anything that we are talking about during this, you feel overwhelmed or a little stressed out or something, please be mindful and take care of yourself. If you do are feeling suicidal, the hotline number is 988. So please take care of yourself. If for any time we say anything that might make you feel uncomfortable. All right. I'm going to keep admitting people here. And Connor, welcome. Thank you so much again for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So the first thing that I was curious about was, why did you take to social media? What was the thing that
Sorry, go
made
ahead.
you go, that's it, I got to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot. Like, I started coming out of the fog, probably around like almost 3 years ago, like 2.5 years ago, I would say my kid was born. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts. I've read a lot of books. I feel like I've said this before. Like, it, it, I feel like there's a kind of this idea that open adoption is the panacea. And I hear on Haley's podcast, Stop These On. I hear like all over everywhere basically that like, oh, open adoption just fixes everything. And I just never really felt any different. I've been in the support groups, I've been in these types of calls with like people in support groups or just like adoption chats or whatever you want to say. And I didn't really feel that different. I felt like I had what a lot of people didn't have access to growing up in our community and still felt like all the same feelings. I feel like, I mean, obviously not the exact same feelings every single person, but like by and large the same feelings. And I also remember like early on in one of my like in one of the support groups I was in, someone was like a Chinese adoptee who was actually younger than me, which is like pretty rare to be in a call like that. And she was saying like, "Oh, I just wish that I like knew who like what my parents' names were, like so, could see their face or something like that." And I really felt for her because I was like, I mean, I have that feeling too in some ways, but I do know my dad's name and I have seen his face and I still don't have that connection. And I still feel like that has been this giant thing in my life for my whole life. On top of, all of the complexities of being in like an open adoption with my mom and that stuff. And just thinking like, information, our search for information and our search for like healing are two very different things. And yeah, I don't know. I think I've read enough books, I've heard enough people speak, and I felt like there's like not to say that people aren't doing enough. I think everyone's doing like the best they can to spread awareness. But the other side always pushes back with, well, none of you are an open adoption. Like none of you really have had this experience of we fixed it, right? We fixed it 20, 30 years ago. And yeah, I just don't really think that's true at all. And so I really want to use like the platform I'm trying to create to push back on the lies, really. I mean, obviously, adoption has a lot of complexities, and not everyone's going to be an abolitionist like me or anyone else that might be in this call. But at the same time, you can get to a good like starting point of saying, hey, well, at the very least, we can say that this solution that we've been like propping up for 30 years is a complete lie in a lot of ways. So,
Yeah. Mine was, I had basically come tumbling out of the fog during reunion. I had never seen anyone that I was biologically related to. And this was one of the main reasons why I was so interested in talking to you because we're both adoptees. We both talk about things through a similar lens if you listen to us, but we have the almost opposite situations. Yours was open, mine was closed. You knew your mother. I never met my mother. I did meet my father and knew him for 3 years before he passed last year. And you haven't met your father. So I found that the opposites were going to be very interesting, even though how we feel about it is very similar. Yeah, the lack of information. Uh, I felt like an alien chameleon. You know, there was lots of things that I always called myself. As a matter of fact, this is kind of funny. I thought I had made up chameleon for adoptees. I really did. I thought that I was brilliant and I had made that up. And then I started getting in adoptee groups and there was a book and it had a chameleon on the cover. Lynn Grubb had done this book. And I was just sitting there going, what? And I mean, my mind literally blew up because I had never been around people talking about adoption. It was a secret in my world. It wasn't open like you. And anyway, fast forward. When I met my, yes, sorry, I had to prove something. When I met my sisters and seeing people that I was biologically related to, yeah, my mental health took a hit like I didn't think it could get worse, and it did. I had not prepared. I didn't know what I was doing, and it was really all sorts of bad. I was suicidal. It was a bad time. So the closed adoption aspect of that all of a sudden hitting, that was another thing I wanted to talk about because it literally, I guess, were you ever in a type of a fog? I mean, all human beings can be in a type of a fog, but I was curious, being in an open adoption, how was that? How was the healing aspect as opposed to like me where I came just like crashing out of it?
Oh yeah, no, I mean like I thought adoption was the greatest thing ever,
Okay.
blah, like my life is amazing. I have extra family, right? Like,
Right.
and I've said this before, like when I got married, like both my moms walked me down the aisle. I had a first dance with like both of them, or mother son dance, whatever you want to call it. Um, and there were some positive parts of that, but really like my whole life, I would say it was like extremely challenging from basically age like 4. I was already having problems. And I think like yeah, the like the fog stuff, I mean, it's really tough. I mean, I even looking back at like the marriage I'm in and like the relationships I'm in with people in my life, thinking about like what would my life look like had I figured this stuff out, 5, 10, 15 years ago. And I'm really happy with a lot of the ways that my life looks, but I mean, for example, right? Like if I was single right now, I'd probably be living in Ireland. And to think like oh, I can't just do that now, Like, I mean, I have a wife and a kid, and I'm happy with like, our circumstances, but there's certain things that like you have to make concessions to because of the fact that you didn't really make this discovery earlier. And that's, I think, something that's really challenging, at least for me. I think probably for a lot of adopted people, when you have this, you all of a sudden realize you have all these mental health problems that you've always had, but you like weren't able to actually say out loud until, after your kid was born. And then you're like, oh, wait, this thing that's like always been messed up about me has always been there. And it's like literally, it's never changed, but I'm just now figuring this out that this is what it actually is. Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely have like I actually have like I'm trying to write like a memoir. I'm not even close to basically being started with that, but I have my adoptive mom gave me like all these papers from when I was a kid because I'm trying to like get something from when I was young, and I can't even go through them because it's just I know what it's gonna be. It's just gonna be I'm so grateful. I'm so happy. I'm so lucky. Every single piece of those papers, every letter I wrote to everyone was always like, my life is so amazing. I'm so happy, even though I was miserable the whole time. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's pretty typical, even in open adoption. Again, like, I mean, I have that. I have information that other people don't have. And I do have relationships that other people might not have. But it's not like that really was healing for me. I have the closest family members I have are people that I didn't grow up with, which in some ways is great, but in other ways is like really challenging about like what would my life be like had I grown up with them? You know, what if I could have had a relationship with them 10 years prior when I totally could have, but just didn't because, you know, no one thought that my sister, who's 3 years younger than me, should have been like my sister, quote unquote. She's just, you know, your mom's daughter or whatever it was. So,
Yeah, thank you. And that's a lot of why I'm an embodiment instructor, is because I'm a nervous system geek, because I figured out that the trauma is a trauma and our body doesn't know the difference between traumas. So pre-verbal trauma goes right into the body. And as you just described, you knew it at 4. You just said you knew that in your body at 4. You probably didn't have language for it. I know I didn't as a kid. I just assumed that I was wrong because nobody talked about it. I was their kid. You're our daughter. That's it. That's it. We love you. End of story. Trauma fixed. Um, but it wasn't. And being trapped, and I was an only kid, so I didn't have anybody else. And I didn't know any other adoptees either, so I had no one to talk to, and I don't think as a child, I would know what to even say. But those feelings do go into our body, and until we can find language to let it out, like hopefully these things help us find that language so that we can all understand that what we're feeling inside is normal, so that we can take our power back and hopefully learn that when we have those thoughts and feelings that those are normal. But the adoption is part of that trauma. It's the relinquishment of the mother child from the family and unit is the actual trauma. Adoption is the process of it, correct? Whether it's open or whether it's closed. But we all have to go through it. And that was another part of this. I was really curious about, how you had dealt with your own mental health and healing aspect of that as an open adoptee. Closed, I had an anger issue because it wasn't adoption. And I know a lot of adoptees go through that too, because the mental health field really hasn't recognized it fully that it is, unless you find a trauma-informed therapist. What has along your healing journey with that, did you run into people, even though you had an open adoption, try to tell you that it couldn't be that?
oh yeah, no, my whole life I had anger issues, you know. And I mean, I probably do have anger issues, right? It's not like I don't have a brain that just goes like in a nuclear meltdown mode whenever I'm, you know, feeling however I feel. But it was the exact same thing. It was like you have anger issues and you like uh yeah, it's not really adoption. It can't be adoption. I actually, you know, and like I have mixed feelings about how I grew up with my like adoptive parents. I use the word adopters not as like a derogatory, you know, statement about who they are. I don't like the language policing in adoption. You know, I when I was really young, I had a very challenging relationship with them, and I felt like 99% of what was wrong probably had something to do with them, right? It was their fault. They didn't parent me right. They didn't raise me right. And in some ways, that's probably true. I mean, what parent gets things right 100% of the time? But the older I get, the more systemic it feels. The more it feels like 99% is really things that are outside of their control. And then the 1% might be the people in my life that are kind of making the bad choices. Like, how do you raise an adopted person when the people that like sell you the kid don't give you a playbook on like what to do, you know? And how do you sell a child to someone and recognize that this child has a history, is a person unique of their relationship to you, and isn't a full member of your family. No matter how loving you are, no matter how much you care, they're always going to be someone else's child. And how do you get that person to buy a kid for whatever they're paying now? You know, when I was sold for $12,000. Today it's like $50,000 or more a lot of the time. And I say this a lot, like no one's paying $50,000 to be an auntie, you know? I just feel like it's a conflict of like the adoption agency can't really like achieve both things. You can't be as lucrative of an industry as you want to be and actually take the consideration of the adopted people, but not, again, not just us, right? Like it's our natural families, but it's also the adopters. I mean, I know a lot of adopted people hate hearing that, but it's like I don't really feel like you can actually be equipped to do what you should do um, when they're actually going out of their way to not equip you to be a good parent in that way. And yeah, I mean, I feel like I kind of got lost track there, but it's I just feel like yeah, it's very hard to have that like solid mental health and upbringing and all that stuff when again like I could look at what they did wrong and be like, well, yeah, you shouldn't threaten to send me to military school every time, I'm screaming around at you guys. But like it's not like that's that unusual of a response. My closest adoptee friend growing up, I played basketball with, and he got sent to the military school that I got threatened to get sent to all the time. And I haven't been in touch with him in like 20 years or whatever it's been, or probably like 15 years. But it's things like that really make me upset that things still exist like this, and it makes me mad to think about there's adopted people that are probably going through the exact same thing that I went through today 20 years later or whatever it is. And and that nothing's really changed, right? There's some adopted people with good intentions that are working in these adoption agencies and trying, to make a difference. But how do you rationalize or how do you deal with people who really kind of just see you as kind of the token, like not every adopted person is the token adoptee, but I mean, in some ways you kind of have to like I don't know. How do you really change a system that is predicated on again these massive conflicts of interest? Like I just don't see it really working. And yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but I want to get back to the mental health thing, which is like for me, coming out of the fog was really challenging because I realized again I had these issues my whole life, and then I'm starting to realize this is actually is about adoption. I went to probably as I was growing up, my adoptive parents sent me to I don't know, probably at least like five therapists, with good intentions, right? Like they all wanted to send me to like the Christian therapist because it was a Christian household and blah, blah, blah. And not to say there's anything wrong with Christian therapists, but obviously the focus really should have been like adoption probably has something to do with this. And I think they in their heart of hearts knew that it was probably an adoption issue. But what is it there? Like none of them have read a book about adoption, even though the problem was written before I was born, right? It literally that's a crazy thing to say out loud, but that book was written before I was even born. But no one really knew that book was around. No one really thought about the adoption trauma. So all these therapists didn't really have the answer. Sometimes they would even say like, "Oh, well, adoption was a long time ago. It's probably something else," like. And even as an adult, I went to therapy a couple of times before I actually found an adoption competent therapist. I wish I could look back in time and say like, I wish I could pinpoint what actually made me want to speak to an adoption competent therapist or how I went through that process. I remember I used to like be an internet crusader on a lot of these like forums, like with Facebook, Reddit, and stuff, and I probably heard from someone there. But when I found like the first therapist I had who's an adoptee, that really was a big turning point for me. And I went into support groups and I read a lot of books and all that stuff. Yeah, it was really it was a challenging process for me. I would say it was like a midlife crisis at 27.
Well, I did it much later than you did, but I kind of did the same thing. It was Facebook support groups, reading Primal. Well, I couldn't make it through Primal. I'm just gonna be honest. At first, I could, but it was doing that to try to figure out what was going on because I couldn't find help either. It was my fault. I was angry until I finally found a therapist one day. I was sitting in her office and I said something about anger, and she said, "Well, that's a normal feeling." And I looked at her and I just kind of went, "What?" And she said, "Anger is a normal feeling for what you went through." And she just sat there and looked at me and I bawled. I was like, it felt like somebody had just taken that weight off. And I was like, wait a minute, you're right. That's a normal feeling because anger is a normal emotion. There are reasons why we should be angry, right? So we've always been taught to suppress that that's bad, that's something we're not supposed to have. And that's not true. That's how people really get sick mentally and physically is by suppressing normal emotions. And once I realized that, I could start working it with the body. So it was like a miracle sentence, really, just one person acknowledging that that was normal. And I hope that anybody out there is hearing that. If you're angry, that's a normal feeling. It's okay. You can have that feeling. So now how you react to it is your responsibility. That's the difference. So it took me a long time, lots of training, um, nervous system geek out. I've studied polyvagal theory, all these things, just to kind of understand how our bodies naturally do what they do. And as infants, it horrifies me what happens to our bodies when we're taken from our mothers. Whether it's for good intention or not, this is where people get hung up. They hear you're blaming me. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not trying to shame anybody. I'm trying to explain that that is a normal thing that the human body does. It goes into survival mode because the baby doesn't know. Baby only knows that it has to be taken care of or it dies. So the body goes into survival mode, which affects the nervous system, which is how we get here, which is why whether it's open or closed adoptions, we get to this place. And if we could have that conversation with everyone in a rational tone, I think that we could go far. And my other point is, because you bring this one up a lot, is not only the healing aspect, is the law. The law, it's straight up, adoption is a human rights violation. And I love some of your videos that you've done on this. Um, I've tried to do some. I think you've done them better. But anyway, could you speak to that also, where not only the healing aspect, but then you went, hey, I'm an activist now. I'm speaking out against this.
Yeah, and I also just want to say really quick, because I've seen people commenting about Primal Wound. I know it's a divisive book. I don't know what people are saying in the chat. I just see people talking about it. I want to say, like, if I could give one book recommendation to someone who's never read a book about adoption, I will always recommend Anne Heffron's You Don't Look Adopted. That's probably my favorite, like, book to start. There's a lot of other good books, but that one I feel like really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. It made me feel normal. But sorry, question was about the legal videos and stuff like that. Yeah, for me, I am just like I like to read. I really wasn't I read a lot as a kid and I didn't read for a while. And then I started going to therapy and my therapist started recommending these books. And I was like, I actually really love reading again. And I started reading like crazy, mostly about adoption stuff. Um, and for me, I think when I first started, I don't know the first place I heard about Georgia Tan, probably on Adoptees On, but I looked at her Wikipedia page and I was like, this is actually crazy. Like, there's so many like good true crime and like dark history types of like documentaries and videos on the internet. And how have I never heard about this person? This person literally like completely created the way that the adoption industry looks in the United States today. And it's just on her Wikipedia page. It's not like it's this like deep buried hidden secret. It's just out in the open. Oh yeah, this
Right.
person literally was like about to be prosecuted for human trafficking and then died of cancer. But we didn't really change adoption after she died. We just kept going the exact same way that we went, even though like the methods of like I've probably said it in videos, so forgive me if you've already heard this before, people who are in this video, but or in this call, but like the reason that adoption birth certificates were being sealed was literally so that Georgia Tan could kidnap kids. It wasn't like we want to protect the anonymity of mothers. It was like we literally want to make it so that these mothers and these children can't find each other. Like, and obviously, there might be other reasons beyond that. But that is like honor. I mean, again, it's not really that hidden. And
Right.
it's again this like open adoption, closed adoption thing. I think when I started, what was really important to me was to recognize that like adoption agencies are really, really shady in the way that they talk about open adoption because open adoption can mean a million different things when really open adoption is a legal term. Open adoption is a direct response to the fact that for decades, if not a century, basically, we decided that we're going to axe every birth certificate, put them behind lock and seal so that adopted people can't, access them. Open adoption means that now if the natural parents and the adoptive parents want to be able to know who each other are and do whatever they want to do with that knowledge, they're allowed to. Semi-open means that, that relationship can exist through an intermediary. So the semi-open just means there's an adoption agency in the middle. It drives me crazy when I see all this discourse about the teen mom stuff online because people will say, "Oh, well, they had a semi-open adoption. So what were they expecting?" No, semi-open just means that there's a mediator. That's all that it means. It doesn't mean that it's less open. Not to say that again and again, open just means that they know who each other are. The idea that open adoption means relationship, no, adoption agencies like to pretend that that's what it means because it makes it easier for people to relinquish their children for adoption. But that is a very, very like misleading and intentionally deceptive kind of association they've made. When in reality, again, if you look at adoption from a legal perspective, it's not me trying to be an abolitionist or me trying to rewrite history or be a traumatized, angry adoptee or whatever. No, if you look at the history of adoption in the United States, the reason adoption birth certificates were sealed had nothing to do with mother's protection or anonymity. It literally was a means of like preventing those mothers and children from communicating with each
Yeah,
other.
I
And the
want to
same is
add
really true in
something right
Ireland
there
too.
real quick. I'm sorry, I just have to add this.
No, go ahead.
Thank you so much for saying that because that is the one big thing when you're trying to get the laws. There's probably some people that have worked with that here in this group. When they're trying to get the laws changed and they go in and talk to the congressmen, senators, and people like that, they always say, well, what about the mother's anonymity? And it's because of Georgia Tan and the marketing that she did in those days that continued on to modern day adoption agencies all the way up until now that is still used. But if you go to groups like Concerns United Birth Parents, there is a statement on their website that clearly says, we never asked for that. We are fighting for open records for our children and for us. And the adoption agencies are now not, it's just now they're not getting a leg to stand on because they keep coming up. It's the biological and birth mothers, first mothers, whatever term is that you like, I don't want to be disrespectful, by them standing up, that people are actually listening to it to fight that, what you just said, because of something Georgia Tan. And she also, she didn't start it, but she was the one that sold the blank slate and the gift is Christmas. She really had ads in newspapers with babies. I mean, as gifts for Christmas. And that term, a baby, I mean, I understand my child is a gift and stuff. That's different. But when you're gifting your child to someone else, that one just crawls all up and down me. My whole nervous system, I just feel it go, ugh, when someone's like, well, I gave them a gift. And I'm like, you don't gift human beings. You don't gift human beings. And then that goes back to the laws, right? The UN didn't sign the Convention of the Rights of the Child because half of them would make the adoption agencies shut down here in the United States because they don't abide by the human rights. So anyway, I got off on a tangent there because that one gets me
No, I
going.
think it's important. I mean, like, I think the fact that so many adopted people don't understand the difference between open, closed, semi-open really goes to show if we don't understand, how else is the rest of the world going to understand? And for me, like, in making the videos that I make, a lot of adopted people make videos trying to heal and support other adopted people, and I think that's great. But my primary focus is to make videos for people who aren't adopted and to help people who don't know anything about this stuff to be able to understand why is it that every once in a while you see some video from an adopted person complaining or whatever. Like, okay, well, this is why they have these feelings. This is why, adopted people are advocating for birth certificate access and things like that. Because like you said, I mean, it is a human rights violation. And that sounds I think it's really challenging because a lot of adopted people, including myself, get really worked up about this stuff, rightfully so. And it feels like, I mean, come on, you guys are so mad about something that like, who really cares? But I think if you're not in these shoes, it's easy to feel like that. And I think it's important to be able, in our shoes, people to see why would someone on the street think that it's this egregious violation of someone's human rights to not have a piece of paper, right? And so being able to kind of explain that to someone who has never heard the argument before in a way that they might actually be able to understand and listen, I think is huge, especially in this generation, where marginalized voices, I mean, maybe not the past like 6 weeks or whatever, but like the marginalized voices have really like gotten a seat at the table and become a part of the conversation, and not to like marginalization Olympics or anything like that, but I remember getting really, maybe a little bit irrationally upset last year because Biden had this big statement on like welcoming trans people. I thought that was okay, great. And then for adopted people, all we have is like National, Adoption Month, which is literally celebrating the act of family separation. And adopted people are a massive, massive percentage of the population relative to like trans people. Again, not to say that trans people don't deserve, like, I think it's great. But again, like adopted people, it's like 1 million adopted people, 2 million people, adopted people in the United States, and we don't have, any sort. We don't even have, we're not part of the conversation at all. And maybe that's for the best that people aren't saying, demonizing us or whatever. But like the fact that it takes so much energy and effort just to kind of like engage with anyone who hasn't been engaged with this type of conversation or topic before, I think is really challenging. And so yeah, I mean, for me it's really a huge priority just to kind of like get those conversations out in the open, pop that bubble, even if it means I get, 1 million DMs from people who hate me or want to say mean things to me. I can take that because I just want these things to change. I don't like the idea of like being the token open adoptee that these adoption agencies wave in front of hopeful adopters and say, look, your child can have it all together. When if all of us could go back in time, me, my natural mother, my adopters, everyone in my life, like I think all of us would say, like, what was kind of marketed towards what our lives would look like versus the reality is just so, so different. Not to say that it's all bad, but like it's adoption is an industry built on empty promises.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. And there was something I wanted to mention when I had talked to Connor and asked him if he'd be willing to do this. And we were getting to know each other for a few minutes, just say, hey, we're real humans. I found out that he used to be a media buyer and I was a marketing manager. So for people that don't know in the before times, before we do the things we do now, to me, it made sense to become the adopted chameleon because I had been a marketing manager and I had literally had to do social media every single day for, I don't know, 10 years before that. I mean, I had literally, it was my job to do social media. And I knew that if we were ever going to change anything, we had to change the narrative because the narrative was not our narrative. The narrative was from the adoption agency's narrative. And there were hurdles we had to get over, which were the human rights things, which were the mental health things. So the statistics came in, and that's how I started bringing that in. And I love the fact that there are so many adoptees talking in their own voice, showing people in their own way. And that's what I love because we never know how it's going to get in. People don't always hear things in the same way. So I might say something and people will hear it. You might say things and people will hear it. Maybe hear both of us, or maybe people hear none of us and they hear other adoptees. And now there are so many speaking out that the narrative has changed. I do know for a fact that Gladney actually has 5 adoptees that they say to watch. And now I don't have the list with me. I wish I'd brought that. I was not one of them.
I would assume
But
neither of us are on that
no,
list.
we are not on that list. Don't worry, we are not on Gladney's list. But I kind of wish I was. But
I'm on a different list.
I do too. But anyway, they are acknowledging that we are out here now, is what my point was, is they're acknowledging that we're out here. And I do actually have adopted parents. I wish they would set an appointment through my website, but they DM me, what can I do, da, da, da. And I try to give everybody as much of my time as I can, but I don't get paid for that. And I was going to mention before, since we're halfway through, Connor and I do have our Venmos, which Jude's going to put some links in the chat for us. If you all do want to donate, fantastic. That helps us go, and we have to pay for the apps, the websites, the this and the that's, and our time. Anyway, anything is greatly appreciated, and so I wanted to put that out there into the universe. Um, but also the seat at the table. That was where I was going to go with there. I've been talking to adoptees for the last year, saying let's take a seat at the table. And last year, my opportunity came here in Oklahoma. They had a steering and implementation committee that started here in Oklahoma that is looking at getting better and more mental health care to people in foster care and people that have been affected by adoption. When it started, I was the token adoptee. I was it. I was the only adoptee on this panel. And this is the whole state of Oklahoma. I was like, this isn't right. So got other people in there. So now we do. There's several of us that have a seat at the table here in Oklahoma. And the place, the NTI training, will be going to other states. So I'm working to get other adoptees the seat at the table. And don't wait for an invite. Go knock on doors, social workers, schools, and things like that. They have, a lot of them have programs that you can do lunch and learns like I did. Angela Tucker, she goes around to a lot of the social workers schools and does lectures. They fly her in. So if that is something you all are interested in, I'm going to put that one out there because I didn't know it existed. So, I am sure that other people don't either. We all know what we know when we get there, right? So I try to share as much as I can because, again, like Connor and I being out there every day, the more of us that are talking, the narrative is changing, and we need all the voices. So I just want to throw that in there. And Connor is hot, hot, hot property right now.
I don't really know if that's true. I mean, I don't really have much going on. Stay home dad.
Yeah. But also, alluding to that one, I wanted to know about how you being a man on social media, how you get treated, and then I'll share a few things of how I'm treated on social media because I have a feeling maybe we're treated the same, maybe we're not. I'm just curious. Let's have a
Yeah,
chat.
I think like people, it's really interesting because obviously people kind of think about the like what are the differences in how people are treated. I'll just speak to my own experience, which is that like I feel that um people are very, very open with how they feel about me whenever, I make a video that people aren't happy with. Obviously I don't want to like really speak to how adopted people are because everyone's pretty nice for the most part. But I would say that usually most comments are pretty normal. But every once in a while I'll make a video usually something that I would say pushes back on maybe one of the super conservative agenda points or whatever. I've made videos on being adopted by anti-vaxxers before, and those videos people go ballistic. I mean, I think I had a video with over 2,000 comments when I had less than 2,000 followers, which is just like actually insane to think about. But and then people it's usually the direct messages I think that people are really cowards with that they will, tell me to go kill myself or whatever it is. I get a lot of that, honestly. And I think like growing up, I became very used to that. Not necessarily death threats or anything like that, but just I got bullied a lot being adopted. I have a brother who's like 4 months younger than me, and so we like beat the shit out of each other growing up all the time, like not like normal brothers do, like really really bad. And and so I think I guess I'm more used to kind of like a violent dynamic, not just like also like a violent emotional dynamic, I guess. And yeah, I mean, I've kind of heard it all. I feel like people have come up with new ways of like, people will say like, I don't want to get into specifics in case people are sensitive, but like people have found new ways to make those kind of death threat remarks that like I didn't even really know existed when I was a kid because it's like new, Gen Z or whatever slang of how to say this stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously there's also a lot of people who just are like oh, like why would you even think that? You're so ungrateful or whatever. That kind of normal, like somewhat milder dynamics, but it's really in the DMs that people show their true colors. And I just like to respond to people and mess with them pretty much. I pretty much never don't respond to a message. So anytime I'll make a video that I wake up and I have like 15 DMs and they're all in the like request folder because they're coming
Yep.
from
Hmm.
people who have probably had their responses flagged before from other
Yep.
people. And then I just say I just copy paste, sorry for triggering you every single time I respond to them. And then they go crazy. They're like, I'm not triggered, I'm not triggered.
Yeah, that
And
word.
I've had people try to like voice call me like on Instagram before, like and be like, "What, you don't want to debate me?" And it's like, "No, I'm with my kid right now. Like I'm not gonna get in a voice call with you." Um, yeah, people really don't have like lives. I feel like a lot of the people that message this stuff, it's made me really a lot more cognizant of, I guess not really the male female kind of like behavior treatment or whatever, but more so that there really are people online who really have nothing better to do or really are that I actually feel like a lot of like sympathy for those people or empathy
Right,
that like
right.
I mean I've definitely been upset by things before online, but not to the point where I'm like sending messages to someone who makes a video that hurts my feelings.
A
And
stranger, a stranger.
it's yeah, and I maybe it's not really nice or fair of me to be able like that, I'm antagonizing these people back. But I think that there's a certain line that when that line gets crossed, I don't really care about you anymore. And that line has been crossed hundreds of times at this point. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's something that I'm not super public about, not for just because I don't really think it's that relevant to what I say, but it's definitely like yeah, I don't really, honestly, I don't always know how I can deal with it because it's like a lot. But I don't know. I just feel like I'm kind of numb to it or immune to it at this point in some ways, knock on wood. Um, yeah, it's obviously again the comments you see on my videos are one thing, but it's really the direct messages, and it's mostly from cowards. It's from people who who like to say like really offensive or hurtful things that I've just heard it before, so it doesn't hurt. But if it's the first time I was hearing it, maybe it would hurt, I don't know.
Yeah. And what's sad is the people that are sending those messages to adoptees don't understand that they could literally be sending a message to an adoptee on a day that they could be having a really bad day and could send them even worse. And they could send them into a spiral.
Oh yeah.
They could do some horrible damage. And
I live next to, not that this is super important to the conversation, but I live like a 15-minute drive away from like the number two bridge for suicide in
mhm,
California. And every time I drive by that bridge, I mean I'm not a super I just it's one of those things that crosses my mind, like not an infrequent amount, and I'm fortunate that I'm just knock on wood again, but I'm not one of those people that has really felt the motivation as much as the kind of that thought wandering in my head. And you're right. I mean, it's really not something that people should be saying. It's not something people should tolerate. Um, but yeah, there's really nothing to do. I mean, these social media networks, how do you moderate everything? And
right,
they've gone out of their way to not moderate everything. And
right,
not to say that even should be their responsibility, because at the end of the day,
right,
people should just know better. And it makes again, it's one of those things like the hurt people, right? Like I
right.
grew up and I used to get bullied and I was like, these guys are all the worst or whatever. And then I would bully people and you can kind of see that like it gets passed on. It's like someone gets hurt and then they hurt and then the cycle continues. And I
Right.
don't really know how to fix that. That's definitely above my pay grade, but it does. It's really, um, yeah, it's hard.
If people could only understand that when they are uncomfortable, to lean into it instead of resisting it, and that's where the growth is. That's the moment. I actually get really happy when people get uncomfortable because I'm like, oh, please pick up a book. Go listen to somebody. Go ask a question. Ask Chat GPT. I don't care what you do. Just get uncomfortable enough to do something. Go into action mode. So I purposefully make people uncomfortable a little bit because I'm the marketing manager. I know I have about that much time to catch their attention. So sometimes I say things in definitives, which I try not to, but every now and then I'll throw one in just to make them stop. And then if they read or listen to me, then they understand why I'm saying it. But I do play the algorithm, like we play the algorithm because we need the narratives to change so that there aren't adoptees going to be traumatized because somebody just wanted a baby, that there are children out there that are being taken care of by people that aren't biologically related to them, that are blaming the child for their actions instead of saying what happened to the child and how can I help them. So these are the narratives that I'm trying to change. If I have to do a little bit of shaking people up, slapping a few faces, then they should thank me because that's what I'm trying to do, is just get you just a tiny little bit safely uncomfortable. And then you will be better for it. You really will. After we
Yeah.
go through the uncomfortable phases, we look back and we're like, damn, I know better now. I'm a better person for that uncomfortable conversation that I had, or that uncomfortable moment, or the time that somebody called me out and I sat down and I listened to them. I listen to people that call me out all the time. I've even apologized. I've even gone back and said, you know what, you're right. I didn't mean to say it that way. I said it wrong. Because, yeah, the mouth opens and things fly out, and sometimes it's not perfect. And
Yeah.
and that's just social media, though, because we're being real. I'm not monetizing on this. I've had a few bucks thrown at me here and there, but trust me, it is nothing paying for everything that I pay for. But I do it because I want to. I want to change. I want this to get better for us all, and hopefully to stop future generations from having to go online and journal and stuff. Maybe they can go do something else. I mean, maybe this is
Yeah.
their goal, whatever it is.
I also think like not every hill is worth dying on. Like,
That's
you
true.
asked me earlier what got me into this. And part of it was I'd be like a lot of people that I see in the comment sections of my videos, right? It's like people go back and forth, they go back and forth, they go back and forth, and I get notifications on arguments that people are having like 5 months after I post a video, right? And it's like I again, it's one of those things people I get it. Like I've been that person before. And I think for me what really changed was realizing like I got banned off of the adoption subreddit.
Mm,
And I that for me like was really I think revealing about a lot of what it came from there. But also made like I looked at it, right, and I see, okay, this is like a just some subsection of the internet that has like 60,000 people on it. Well, okay, what if I make something bigger than that, that people will listen to? Um and I mean, I knock on wood, but hopefully I'll get there. I think I can get bigger than that. And it's really like what I realized when I got banned was like I I'm having conversations like one-on-one with people. Who gives a shit if one person changes their mind? Like that's not gonna do shit. Like you've still got millions and millions and millions and millions of people to convince. And so what is the point of like you said, I was a media buyer. So basically I would I'd make like giant advertising campaigns. I probably spent like $50 million on advertising throughout my like 10-ish years of maybe not even 10 years of doing advertising. And uh my like coworkers and I would always joke like not joke, but like we would talk about every ad you make is like you're just throwing darts at a dartboard. And so make as many as you can and you hope one of them sticks. And then one of them makes you, $1 million or whatever. And all the other ones make you like $100 or they lose you money or whatever. But you just throw one thing that you throw one dart and that one dart does really well. And I think like again, you can be that person that's in the comment section every single day and you might change 10 minds. You make one video that gets, I have a video that's done like 1 million views or whatever on Facebook and on Instagram. That video changes hundreds of people's minds. Not necessarily that they're, ride or die with adoption people now, but how many of those one-on-one conversations would I have had to have with people? How much of my time would I have to spend to actually achieve that same outcome? And for me, I realized like I actually do have the means of like figuring this stuff out. I know how like the attention as a commodity works and like advertising and getting people
mhm.
to click and watch things. As you can probably the people you probably are maybe surprised to hear me not screaming right now because it's like I feel like in my videos I'm so animated and stuff, but that's how
Yeah,
you get people to watch a
right.
lot of the time. And it's like
It
I
activates
I
their
don't want
sympathetic
to.
nervous system.
Yeah, I don't want to be that person necessarily, but like to get people to watch something that if what you're trying to do is upset people, you have to upset people, and so you that's the whole point is you make them upset, and then you make them realize this is upsetting, this is what has to change. Like, um, so yeah, I just think like especially to obviously not everyone in the world is going to watch this video, but like if you're out there and you feel like I got to make a difference, I think it's important to kind of recognize. I was beating my head up against a wall for like over a year, probably longer than that, just trying to change one mind at a time. And I'm not saying that everyone should go out there and try to make an Instagram page that blows up. It's not really like you said, there's not a lot of money in it. It's a lot of time that you commit, and it's you have to like commit a lot to like learning how to make the video, learning
Oh
how to
God,
make the
yes.
like it's
The
it's
apps.
it's just not worth most people's time. My whole goal is to just do it so no one else has to do it, right? If one person could do it to a point where people will actually see it at a mass level, then I save how many people these conversations, That's really the way that I'm approaching it. So,
Yeah.
and obviously there's other people out there. Haley's doing it on her podcast. There's documentary people.
Hmm.
Like there's all kinds of people that are trying to change the collective mind about this adoption stuff because what the world sees right now is Juno and the blind side, and it's like, okay, we gotta move past that and really recognize that it's not that simple.
Yeah. And when you said documentary, I see Lisa Lane Scott. I see you. I'm waiting on that documentary. Yes, there are amazing people out there, and all these people here have their voices too. And like you said, you don't have to have an Instagram, YouTube page. You can journal just for yourself. I mean, that is something because if you're helping yourself, you're helping everybody else. So I'm at that. I understand the media and stuff because I was marketing manager, but being an embodiment coach, I'm understanding that changing one mind at a time is just as valuable as the millions too, because that one seed that you plant can go far and wide. So I kind of hit it both ways because they both they are both valid, and I think that they're
For
both
sure.
necessary. And I there's literally thousands of adoptees now. I remember when I could follow all of them. And now I'm like going, there's so many. And someone will talk about them like, I don't know if I'm following them, send them to me. So I've tried so hard. And then I have the Adopted Chameleons group, and that's now over 1,100 people in there. And I have Adoptees Connect Tulsa. So I do things that people don't see on social media too, like the Steering and Implementation Committee, like the Adoptees Connect Tulsa things like that. So, and I know a lot of people do those things too that we're not seeing at all. Like the adoptees that I work with on the Steering and Implementation Committee, they're not on social media at all. These people are social workers, boots on the ground, making their voices be heard. And that's what I love. I have to remember that those people are out there too. We're not seeing them on social media, but they're there. So that we are being heard. It's just that people still have an obsession, specifically with babies. I'm just going to talk about this with babies. um, and they feel that everyone should have one. They don't think about the consequences of adoption, surrogacy, donor conception, embryo adoption. They don't consider what is that going to do to the child. They always focus on, well, these people can't have a baby because XYZ, whatever it is. And they want them to have it. I wish everybody could have a family at 112. I really do. I'm not, again, blaming people for wanting to have a family. I get it. But there are better ways to help children. You could be the best auntie ever. You could volunteer your time. You know, there are children that actually need kinship, fictive kinship, guardianship, conservativeship, children that need loving, caring homes. Those children exist, unfortunately. So those people that are waiting, years for a baby, what are they waiting for? I mean, they need to be going to therapy because what they're going to be doing is passing on generational trauma. They're not getting over. This is why I talk about my adopted parents. They were good people, but they never got over their trauma. So they passed it down to me unintentionally, but they did, just like my birth mother did unintentionally, but she did. And why we're having the conversations, right? I saw you. Go ahead.
Know me?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh no, I was just yeah, I was gonna say like people just don't know. People don't want to. They want the baby, but they don't want to know where the baby comes from,
right. They don't want to
and
know how the sausage is made.
they need to see it. And then if they can look, if they can still say, I still want to do this, that's fine with me. I mean, I don't, I think you're probably the people that still want to participate probably don't understand. So maybe it shouldn't be fine with me. But like, I really think that if people understood this is the like adoption is, I say it a lot in my videos, like if it's a political failure, right? We don't take care of our people.
Right.
If we took care of our people, how many unnecessary adoptions would be happening? Probably very few,
Yeah,
if not like almost zero.
yeah.
And uh and yeah, like I mean, it's an illusion that has to break, and I think the best way to do that is, at least in the videos that I make, is try to talk about the political side and say, hey, look, like
Yes.
this is a political solution to a problem that doesn't like it's very far downstream and it's still not that effective because look at how many people are in calls like this. How many, why I'm making videos, it's probably not because I'm super happy with the way that adoption works. Like, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's so many things to do, but it's yeah, I don't even know.
Well, and other countries do it better, and they do have far fewer adoptions. Do you know what a baby box
Yeah.
is in Scotland? I did a
Oh
video
yeah.
about this a long time
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, a baby box in Scotland, in case someone doesn't know, maybe you all do know, is a literal box that they fill with everything that the mother and the baby would need. They also give the mother money, and some countries even give mothers a full year off with the baby. And their mental health is far better in those countries. They don't have the issues that we have because they support the families at the beginning. That's what Connor was talking about.
It's
That's
not
what
even related to adoption. It's like you just give them $1,000 because they're a mom. Like, Elon Musk is talking about how our population's in decline. We need more people to have kids. But like, we
well,
don't
take care
even
of them.
think about incentivizing people with any level of financial incentive, right? Like, how many people would want to have a kid if you paid them $1,000? How many people would be able to raise their own children if you gave them $1,000? That's less than like our stimulus checks. It's not really like this crazy, crazy, whatever progressive idea. It's not, it's like it's literally like bare minimum, but we don't do it.
Right. Yes. And I'm trying to remember. I can't remember whose video this was. It might have been Katie from Family Preservation. But they were talking about during the pandemic when the stimulus checks went out, people did have some babies and kept their babies, so it affected it. They showed that it did affect that. So yes, if they keep wanting everybody to have these children and they're trying to force it, then yes, people need the support, and that's what we're all talking about. A lot of people wouldn't be adoptees and wouldn't be birth parents, first parents, because if they had the support, the education, the financial means, and the financial means that they're needing would be far less than what people pay for a baby. So it's skewed really bad. And again, it's because we focus solely on the people that are hoping to adopt and not the consequences of that situation.
Well, and it would arguably cost less to taxpayers as well. I mean, we
Right.
don't really
Yes.
think
Yes.
about the fact that we're subsidizing like 90 something. I don't know. I don't know the stats. It might be less than 90, but
Yeah.
it's a significant number of adoptions that
Right.
adopters are getting $16,000 now in tax credits every time a child is adopted. I mean, that's a crazy number, and people will say, "Well, it's we're not giving them checks, right? We're just taking it out of their taxes." That's money that the government would not be that
Right.
is not paying out to people that they would be paying out or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like the money
Yes.
is not
Yes.
being paid that would have been paid or whatever. And it's just yeah, it's
Right.
ridiculous. I mean, it's insane to think that we just do not even question, especially in this like efficiency era of government, that like maybe our bloated child welfare system could actually be operating in a much more efficient manner
That's
if
right.
we took very basic steps to help families. Again, not to
Yeah.
say that even you don't even have to be an abolitionist, I think, to feel that way. That like, oh yeah, maybe maybe like some level of assistance or support to families beyond like food stamps would actually help parents raise their children.
Right. And then that's a whole nother story about foster care, but unfortunately it is noon. We'll have to talk some more, Connor. We're getting ready to take some questions from you all. So start putting them in the chat. If you all do want to come off mute and come on screen and ask them, we'll let you do that. I want to thank Jude because she's been monitoring the chat for us. So thank you again, Jude. I did also want to take a moment to mention one thing before we stop the recording and start taking the Q&A, that we have some nonprofits that I wanted to highlight at this time. It's Adoptees United. They help with law and they're helping with transracial adoptees, the ones that might be deported. They're helping with lots of things law. Saving Our Sisters, you all probably know of them. They are a group that helps birth mothers and gives them support. And they have, both of these organizations have volunteer opportunities and would love any kind of donation. So I did want to mention that because at our last Adoptees Connect Tulsa meeting, we were kind of talking about it. And we don't all know all the nonprofits that are around. So I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention that those are two that are really, really good. And Jude's going to put that in the chat for you, their website, so that you can go there. But it's Adoptees United and Saving Our Sisters. So with that, oh, and one other thing, I just got confirmation of the next Chameleon chat on April 8th, and I will be speaking with the outspoken adoptee and Spicy Jacqueline. So stay tuned for that. I'll get that information out there. I am going to stop the recording now.